Today's sermon, which is about love, just love. I'll probably use my daughter for a definition at least one more time in this sermon. That is what we're going to talk about today. We'll share some verses from Matthew 22. Matthew 22, one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question. The only reason he asked him a question was to tempt him, saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God. It's a profound answer, Christ. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, your soul, your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, and on these two commandments hang all. Somebody say all.
All.
Not most of the law, not some of the law. Not 600 of Moses' 613 rigid rules and requirements, but all, every law, everything Moses ever commanded, everything you are instructed to do in the Torah, everything still comes back to whether or not you do these two things. Love God and love you. On these two commandments. You can't get it simple. Christ couldn't have made it any plainer. Love God, love people. Everything you do for God hangs on those two commandments. It is precisely because of this word from Christ that a few decades later Paul would instruct the church by writing to the Corinthians. What he wrote to them in 1 Corinthians 13, and we're going to go there in the first verse, 1 Corinthians 13, and read what Paul wrote for all of us to practice. If I speak in tongues of men, in tongues of angels, but I don't have love, I am a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I had the kind of faith that could remove a mountain, but I did not have love, then I would be nothing. And if I was so generous and so kind-hearted and so charitable that I gave away everything I had, delivered my body as a martyr to be burned, but I did none of it with love, I would gain profit, benefit, nothing from all of that charity. Leave the scriptures on the screen for a minute and just look at what he said. Speak in tongues of men. Speak like angels. Speak to angels. Who knows? But if I did that, didn't have love, nothing. Just making noise. Prophecy, prophetic power. If I could sing with you out right now and tell you the secret of your heart, but I didn't have love, well, what could it mean? Nothing. If I had the kind of faith, I could move every obstacle out from in front of me. If I could have made Echo's video work today, that would have just made me smarter than Travis and Jeff. But, I mean, still, it would have been a miracle. But it wouldn't mean anything if I just did it to brag that I finally did something they couldn't do. And didn't do it out of love. That's what he's trying to say. You get it, don't you? He's not speaking in religious prose. He's trying to make an astute, almost unbelievable point. These three verses challenge our religious acts. Paul doesn't chide us for our acts. He's not saying you're doing it wrong because you're not loving. He is clearly telling us that if love is not our motivation, then everything we're doing is meaningless. It's just a ceremony or a ritual. And these three verses ought to challenge us. Introspectively, we ought to ask, well, why are we even here today? Why do we come to church? Why do we give to those who are suffering? Why do we pray for the sick? Why do we sing songs and say that we worship? Why do we hope for miracles in our lives? the lives of others. And if our motivation behind all those things we do is not love, then what we do is meaningless. It's a noisy, clanging cymbal. We come to church to fulfill obligation, and not because we love Christ and love our neighbor. Remember his challenge? Love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. And then the second commandment, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Is that why you're here today? Is it because you're trying to lose some guilt? You're making up the bad things you did? I had a man actually tell me one time, he meant well. He didn't really mean it the way he said it. And I chuckled about it and offered him a better way to say it later. But he actually said to me one time, he said, you know, I just can't hardly miss a Sunday. And I said, well, I'm glad. I like people like you. Well, I did so many bad things in my youth. I feel like I could go to church every Sunday for the rest of my life, and I still wouldn't make up for it. So that's why you're coming to church. You'll make up for 10 bad years of your life. You're a troublemaker, in and out of jail. You make it up for it. I don't think so. And I get the idea. A lot of what we do after we realize we were traveling the wrong path, there's a lot of what we do on the right path that we kind of balance by what we used to do. Man, I do this, I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. And that's all right, I get that. And you do too. You understand yourself if you've been on the wrong path before and now you're on the right path. I was not criticizing our behavior. It's the right behavior. But what he's saying is that all of us need to dig a little deeper and make sure that we really do fulfill the two great commandments on which every act of religion must hang. Do we understand the love of God for us, and therefore we love him because he first loved us? And do we genuinely love the people that we sometimes serve, sometimes are served by? Are we honoring Christ because we love him? That could be love. I started to say that's love, but it's not always. It could be. I'll explain why. Are we here today because we're leaving a legacy, an example for our kids to follow and others to follow? That's good. And that could also be love, leaving a legacy. Could be. The reason I said could be is because Paul goes on to define love. And that definition of love is where we're going to play a little bit today. The rest of his writing, starting at verse 4, is a description of the very act that Christ told us we had to have to be right. Christ tempted him now. The Lord tempted him. Jesus, what is the great commandment? There's got to be one that stands out above all others. What is the great commandment? Well, there's really 613, and if you violate any one of those, you might as well violate them. If you notice, out of those 613, I don't know if you can really go back and say loving God and loving your neighbor are two of those 613. It's almost like Jesus kind of went beyond Moses' written Torah and said there's something deeper than all of that law that must motivate you, or that's meaningless. And then he gives us two great commandments. And then he says, nothing else you do matters unless those things you do come from love. And then he describes it. It's a good thing he wrote these verses, because otherwise he would just leave it up to us to define love and guess whether we're operating in love or not. But he didn't. He defined it. So we're going to play with these words for a little bit today and go home with a little love in our hearts. Look over at that person right now that you don't like very much. Trapped you, didn't I? You already started looking at them, and now they're like, what? You don't like me? You're going to love them before you leave. That's where I was going with it. Now you got to apologize for looking at them. As if it's that person you don't love. Love is patient. Whoa. My wife may not love me after all. See, I should say I may not love my wife because I know what she's sitting here thinking right now. He's not patient. Yes, I am, darling. I am very patient. I listen to everything you say. I don't remember it. Don't actually record it, but I listen to everything you say. There's no sponge between my ears that absorbs it. But you can't fault me for not listening. I listen. First thing I thought, isn't it interesting? The first thing I thought when I read these verses, I thought of me and my wife. Are we patient with each other? Well, when you get to our age, it's a lot easier to be patient. Because you got no place to go, and you got no fire burning to go do much anyway. So yes, we can sit and listen to each other's dribble for hours on end. Because we got nothing better to do. But I can tell you that when we were younger, it was very, very hard for me to sit down and listen too much. My brain never stops running. My motor rarely slows down. I want to be doing something all the time. I want to be reading, thinking, watching, playing. I mean, it's hard for me to be idle, just sit. And it's impossible for my wife to be convinced that I'm listening if I'm not idle. You know what I'm talking about. Some of you men are so nervous right now, you're hoping and praying that I quit this and move on. And don't talk about doing stuff. I can listen while I'm working. No, you can't. You can't concentrate. You can't be standing there working, putting something together, screwdriver, bolt, welder, computer in your lap, remote control changing as you're listening. No, I'm listening. Go ahead. Click, click. No, seriously. Go ahead. No, listen. Listen, that's not even what this verse is about. It's just a good starting point for all of us to do a little looking within. I could ask everybody in this room, do you love your spouse if you're married? And you say, well, of course I do. And then if I follow that immediately with, are you terribly patient and kind? Well, sometimes. Okay, so you love something. Well, you know what? You come live with my wife for a little while, and then you'll sing a different tune, big boy. See, some of you are already thinking that, weren't you? I wish you had to listen to what I had to listen to. You'd understand why I weld. Why I'm on the computer. Listen, it's a small point, and yet it's such a point that Christ said everything hangs on. And here we can kind of joke about the definition of love, and yet Christ said everything hinges on this. I don't know why it's so difficult for us to just accept what Jesus said and then read the verses like they read. But I mean, that's what we kind of excuse ourselves for our bad behavior and still think that we're practicing love. But if you really love, guess what? You're going to be patient and kind. And I don't have any excuses for any of us today. If you lack patience with a person you act like you love, and you can't be kind to them in adverse moments, let's be fair enough to say, maybe I do need to go back and re-examine my heart of love. If my definition of love is different from the Scripture's definition of love, who do you think is right and wrong? I'm right and God got it wrong? Or I need to work on me a little bit more? And I don't know if you ever get to a place, some of you old timers, Rick, you could probably tell us, hey, there's no old timers left. It's down to being Rick. Some of you old timers could tell us if there's ever a place where you're not working on improving, but I haven't found it. At 65, I'm still a toad. And my wife long ago quit trying to kiss me to see if I turned into a prince. She gave up. She tried that for years. I just kept becoming an ugly, fatter toad. And so she just, what's the point? I'm trying. I'm really trying. I make a genuine, concerted effort to be patient and be kind. And I still fail. And not so much of my wife, as much as it when you're driving in front of me on the road. Sometimes I get behind some of y'all on the highway, and I swear I don't know how you got a driver's license.
Yeah.
And it is so hard for me to be kind to you. When I finally get a chance to go around you, I want you to see my face in my window. I want you to see what irritation and disgust looks like. Oh, I know, I'm just talking about me, not you. You are Mr. Patient and kind in traffic. I know. Because your heart of love is so overflowing. There's probably nobody in here except me been irritated in traffic in Houston on I-45, anywhere around Grand Parkway or 242 exchanges. Probably ever. Just me. Man, I told somebody the other day, I said, I hope my granddaughter never gets stuck over here on 45. She's not too good a driver already. I mean, if you have a wreck in a college parking lot where nobody's even driving, you're going to do on a freeway that has lanes this wide, with cars this wide, and everybody thinks you still got to drive 75. It doesn't matter how many shoulders they take away and how many times they shrink those buttons. If you're not doing 75, get out of the way! And for us old people, 75 seems really fast when we're between cars and concrete barriers. And I get honked at once in a while on the road, and I try to smile and wave without looking when they go by. Sorry. And then I whip over on their bumper and tell them. No, I haven't done that since I was about 30. Because I am growing. I am improving. It's been a long time since I hollered at somebody in the parking lot. I think Travis was the last time. Travis and I were in the Sam's parking lot one time, and a guy flipped me off. I don't know why. I was waving to let him go across. And then he decided I waited too long, and he just gave me some bad signs. And Travis and I were in the parking lot to find a place to park, go get stuff or whatever. And he walked on through to the next drive, and I thought, what? Patient and kind man that I am. I just went down to the end, U-turned, went right back up, called him in his car on Travis's side, thank God. I hit the power window button, and I heard Travis say, oh no. Oh no. But that's why I put him on Travis's side. I said, hey bud, you got a problem with me? You carried a kid, flipping big loss. Put the kid in the car and come here. I'll show you what a psycho, burned out Vietnam veteran will do to you, toad. And I'm sitting there in the truck, wishing somebody would flip me off again. I don't mean 100 years ago. I mean, you know, since Travis has been my son-in-law. And then the man makes one comment. He clearly doesn't want fire. He just wanted somebody to go away. And then he makes one comment. He said, I'm not the one with a chip on my shoulder. And the minute he said that, truth hit me right between the eyes. That's right. I got a chip on my shoulder. I got a hateful attitude. I'm pitiful. That's stupid. I mean, it's just dumb. And I pulled out to the end of the parking lot and stopped. I think I apologized to Travis. I hope I did. If I did, I'm sorry. I think I apologized. I said, man, he's right. I got a chip on my shoulder. I don't know why. And I accepted that from that man. In order for me to go back and say, how does a Christian claiming he loves God and loves people become so impatient and unkind because of what somebody else does? We justify our bad behavior on somebody else's bad behavior, as if that makes it okay. I wouldn't have done it if they hadn't done it. Then I don't have any more love than they do. Somewhere we have to get the idea that we're supposed to be constantly trying to rise above what everybody else does and everybody else has. When Christ responded to this man, everybody that he would meet in Jerusalem was trying to live up to 613 laws. And Christ challenged all of them to go 2 laws beyond that. going to give you 614 and 615. But I'm going to tell you, everything else hinges on these two. Do you do the things you do, 613 of them, because you love? If not, they don't mean anything. And that's what the challenge is to do. Doesn't matter what I preach on Sunday morning, if I can act like an idiot in a parking lot. Everything I said on Sunday is negated by what really came out of my heart on Monday. Man, we're not Sunday people. We're everyday people. We're not supposed to be putting on a religious dog show on Sunday and act like anything we want to act like during the week. What we hear in the Word of God here is supposed to transform us and change us. And so I came away from a one man's phrase, made me realize that I'm an idiot. And I determined that won't ever happen again. And it hasn't happened. I mean, I have had signs sent to me from various people on the freeway and parking lots. It may be because I will cut you off if you're trying to get into my stall space and park closer to the door than I do. But only if I have my wife with me, because she doesn't like to walk from way out. So I won't blame her. That's not true. I'm just trying to be silly and tell you that's what we do. Is I can be good as long as everybody else is good. I can treat you nice, but boy, don't you ever cross me. But that means you don't have any more love than the aggressor. At some point, you have to start trying to work on you. I will be patient if I'm surrounded by impatient people. I will be kind if I'm surrounded by unkind. Sad little story came out of this ISIS and killing Christians over in parts of Iraq and up in those little villages. They're still trying to rout out Christians. Perhaps you saw the one recently where 17 Christians were slaughtered and beheaded. Most of them, many of them beheaded. A whole bunch of them kids. It's not on our news. Our news is so brainwashed, and our American politics are so pathetic. You don't hear anything on there except who's sleeping with whom and who's, it's just poop. But the story that was printed from one of the priests over there who's been observing what's happening and pleading for American Christians to pray for them and beg their politicians to intervene in some strong measure. And the story was that all those kids, 1,500 that they killed, they told all those kids they had to pray the prayer, there is no God but Allah. Allah is his name, and Muhammad is his messenger. And those kids said, no, we have followed Yasuda, which is their expression for Yeshua, our Jesus. We have followed Yasuda since we were born, and he is enough for us. We only worship Yasuda. We only follow Yasuda. And so their throats were cut. Some of them were beheaded. Some of them were shot through the head. And yet, in that little story that I read, the priest said, the remarkable thing about our Christian martyrs is none of them are fighting against their aggressors. They're not fighting for their lives. And in some cases, the last word you hear some of them say is, Jesus loves you. I love you. I forgive you. And then they're killed. Now there's a love that transcends traffic, parking lot, husband and wife. And there's the love Christ was trying to get us to understand. Love is not patient if you're patient back first. Right, treat me right. Love is not kind as long as you're treating me kind. And don't try to rip me off. Love is patient. Plain and simple. Love is kind. All the time. Love does not envy. It's not jealous of what you have. It's not jealous and makes up reasons why you have more than I have. Love doesn't measure you by all you have or by how little you have. It just takes that out of the equation. It doesn't boast about what it had. Love is not arrogant, presuming. Presuming I have status over you, right over you. Reading these verses this week, and sometimes in ministry, I came up in a church where ministry was within itself kind of a unique sect within the church body. There was a lot of respect demanded of ministers, and ministers often had big high chairs on the stage, and nobody else would dare sit in them. And I used to know a minister, Scott will remember a man from his hometown. We used to go get in Luby's cafeteria parking lot, and an area pastor would be driven up, chauffeured by his bodyguards. And his bodyguards would get out of the car and get in line and save a place in line. And they would go through the line, and when they were ready, the other bodyguard would bring him in, and he would get up to the front and be able to sit in Luby's and sit down with his family and the bodyguards in Luby's. You remember that guy? Chester Hensley used to do that. That was so fun. And we all kind of made fun of him because we were all envious that he had limousines and bodyguards. He didn't have a great big church. Don't misunderstand me. He just liked the celebrity status of being bodyguarded and driven. I went to preach for another gentleman here in Texas many years back, and I was the guest speaker for the evening, and I got there just a little bit early, and the ushers were already honing in on me. Came to me and said, "Are you Reverend Carpenter?" "Yes, I am." "Pastor's waiting on you." And they took me down the hallway and up a stair and into his office, swanky, elegant office. They knocked on the door, and I could tell the moment they stepped in to bring me in that their behavior changed. They were on point for the pastor. They were on their best behavior. They introduced me properly. I stepped in. The pastor offered a big, deep leather recliner to me in his office, and I sat down. A big monitor up on the wall showed the service getting ready to get started in the building. We sat and visited for a few moments. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm close to late. I know it's only a couple of minutes before church time." He said, "Oh, that's fine, that's fine. They should have told you on the phone that you'll have a few minutes anyway when you get here." I said, "Well, okay." I didn't know why. I don't ask. I just wait. And then I hear the director, I see him on the video. They get up and get started. He's still looking at a book over here and making a few notes. He said, "I got a few things I got to take care of. Give me a few minutes." Took care of it. Man, they're in their first song. We're still sitting in the office. Then they go through the second song. I'm impressed. We don't have to be on time like all you people. Me and the preacher. We're just sitting back here in leather chair. Finally, he gets through writing, and then he says, "Well, tell me about yourself. What's going on in your life?" Not much at that. "You're a preacher for you." Basically, because of that offering. I didn't say that. That's my brain. That's why I'm there. And I said, "I'm here to preach." Another song starts. Man, they got songs going in the auditorium. People are clapping. They get with it. That's cool. And I finally said to him, "You know church is starting?" He said, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll go in. Let me see here." He looked over like some notes or something there. He said, when they start some song, that'll be our cue. We'll get up and go." Well, how cool is that? A preacher just gets to sit back there with a refrigerator, drinks, recliner. Everybody in there, they got the offering out of the way. They took the offering. They start something else. Choir is up on stage, getting ready, and then here go. They start this song. He says, "That's our cue. Carpenter, let's go." Okay. Just follow me. we're going to sit on the left side of the stage as you're walking in, but we're going to go down the left side. You just follow me. I'll take the seat on the right. You pointed up the screen. I'll take that seat. You take this seat. Yes, sir. We go down the hallway. We get to the auditorium door. They open those doors. The ushers open them for us. They're already in there singing. When that pastor walked in, that congregation jumped to their feet. And they start clapping while they're singing, because the man of God has come into it. And the little toad behind him needing an offering. He is just, man, he's like playing with Tiger Woods. I'm soaking it up. People are smiling as you go down. Yes, it's me here. Get up there and get to sit in that big high back chair over there. It's so cool. And I don't know why I thought about that this week when I came to this. Why do we love status and posturing and pretending that somehow we're bigger, closer, smarter, closer to God, more right? Why do we thrive on that? How do we forget that we're all pretty much cut from the same cloth and fighting the same battle and serving the same God and living by the same rules and standards? All of us experience life exactly the way it was described by the Old Testament prophet. One day you turn up the cup and drink and it's sweet. And one day you turn up the cup and drink and it's bitter. And you never know which day it will be. There's a time to dance and there's a time to mourn. There's a time to laugh. There's a time to weep. There's a time to plant and give life. There's a time to pluck up that which was planted. Picture of life. And every day, your phone call and my phone call can absolutely change our world. And it matters not what our rank or position is perceived to be in our brains. And I don't mind telling you, even though I joked a little bit about that personal experience, I don't mind telling you that that unnerved me and irritated me that night. That there was such a celebrity status applied to just a pastor, who, if I read the scripture right, is supposed to be more servant than he is Lord of the congregation. He's supposed to be more there for you in your time of need than he is to be served by you, so he gets a false sense of ego and importance. And all I'm saying today is that's not love. Because love is not arrogant. Love, rudeness is the ability that we have to make other people around us feel even smaller than they might already feel. My mother gave me some quotes when I was a youngster in school, and some of them have stayed with me for a long time. Rudeness is a small man's imitation of strength, she told me. You think you're strong when you're rude to somebody and you put them down in front of other people and your buddies and you laugh at them? That means you have no strength and you're faking it. Rudeness is an imitation, weak man's imitation of strength. I made fun of some kids at school, and I got lectured by my mother on rudeness. And why? Because she had already passed this bridge. She had already discovered that my religion on Sunday is empty if everything I'm doing is not coming from love. And she was trying to pass that on to her son. I hate this next one. Verse 5, love does not insist on its own way. Well, Dad burned. I insisted on my own way for probably 20 years. In every pastoring a church, some of you old timers around here for a long time. Well, I'm sorry, Rick's the only one old been around here for a long time. I mean, Clifford's not old. Don't think. I don't know how many marriages start that way, with the idea that we have to have, my way has got to be the only way. My way or the highway becomes our motto. And I know when you know you're right, it's pretty hard to let stupid take over. Oh, that was rude, wasn't it? Well, see, I didn't call any names. But sometimes even knowing you're right, you might not be right. Anybody ever actually known you were right and then later on change your mind? Am I the only person who has known he was right and then later I changed my mind? You know, Don, how you lied to your wife about that? Oh, you did? Well, I did. I've made up stuff. I told my wife before I read something in Reader's Digest that supported a point when I really hadn't read anything in Reader's Digest. I just knew she hadn't either. So she wouldn't know that it wasn't there. Some doctor wrote this thing in Reader's Digest. So, you know, that's like the Bible from my generation. Back in the old days, Reader's Digest was like the Bible. It had to be true. If it's in Reader's Digest, it's like the internet now. It's on YouTube. It's got to be true. I've made stuff up before to win an argument because I knew I was right. And I couldn't convince you. I knew I was right. So I made something up. If I knew somebody named Dr. Cootie, if I knew somebody's name, I'd throw it in there. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, I'd read something that contradicted what I knew was right. And you think I'm going to crawl back to my wife and say, you know what, you were right? Oh, no, not me. I've never been good at crawling, but I am pretty good at weaseling. So I would try to come back and say, you know, I've kind of been thinking about what you said. And I think you'd be all right if we kind of, you know, do it. I mean, even though it's not, and then she's like, no, we're going to do it your way, because she loves one, I do. She'd already given up insisting on her way. And I'm realizing, no, your way was right, and I can't tell you it was right. How do I've created dilemmas to myself along the line, and none of those dilemmas would have ever existed if I didn't just have practice. Don't insist on being genius. Don't insist on being the right one. I got friends that are like that, and they're obnoxious. I played golf with a guy here a while back, and I was never so tired of a golf game. I got through with a man I didn't know well. I came in, my wife said, "How was golf?" And I said, "Don't ask." And then you know what wives do. You know, I said, "Don't ask," and then you come right back. Why? Was it bad? What part of "don't ask"? I don't want to talk about it. Well, now you've created a monster in the room. Some people are not going to be satisfied until they get all the details. Now that you've described it. So I've learned to just say, "Oh, it's great. It's great. Oh, it's the truth." My wife will tell you, it doesn't matter what I do. When she asks, "How did it go?" I say, "Oh, it's great." It's great, because I know if I throw one thing out there, miss, I want to know everything. It's going to force me to talk about things I don't want to talk about. I wish I could master 1 Corinthians 13. A long time ago, somewhere in the middle of our married life, I wrote down a few verses for myself because I'd done it when I was in high school, and it was a good reminder to me. A long time ago, struggling and mad sometimes over nothing, and fussing with Sandy over things that weren't even worth fussing over. I would just get irritated at me for being so impatient and so irritable. You see that the last part of that verse 5, not irritable, not resentful. Good Lord. Some of y'all ought to be squirming today, because I know some of y'all. You don't have irritable bowel syndrome, you just have irritable marriage syndrome. You have IMS. You're just miserable sometimes, and you make sure everybody around you knows, I've heard you. I was there. And I'm telling you, I wrote down a few verses in 1 Corinthians. These verses I've got on the screen were among those verses. I wrote them longhand on a piece of paper. And I just folded them up and stuck them behind the sun visor of my car. And I did it so that every time I stopped at a red light, that was my cell phone of those days. We didn't have cell phones then. Hard to believe, I know, second row, third row. Hadn't always had cell phones. I would reach up and pull that paper down at a red light, and I would just read those verses. Just read them. I never ever read those verses and felt like I was living up to any of them. I never read them and thought, yeah, I'm doing that. And I read them to you today and still don't think I'm doing that. All I can tell you is I'm trying to do that. The reason I'm trying to do it is because Jesus made an outstanding and astounding statement when he said, two things everything else hinges on. Love God, love your neighbor. And that neighbor includes husband, wife, next door neighbor, friend in the church sitting right by you, right around you, co-worker. That's your neighbor. Anybody God has put in your world, that's your neighbor. We don't go out hunting for people to help, just stopping people on the road, you need help. But we live with a philosophy in this church that if anybody walks through that door looking for help, asking for answers, we will get acquainted with them. We will treat them as if God has put them in our world to make them our neighbor. That's what we do. If you run across somebody that needs help, remember the story Jesus gave us? A priest came up to a man who had been beaten and robbed, and he went around and across. Some religious people just left Sunday school, came up, Sabbath school, and they went to the other side. I'm embellishing the story a little bit. And then here came a guy, he just stopped and bound his wounds up, took him down to the hotel and said, put this on man's bill on my tab. Total stranger. Now, who do you think was neighbor to that man? There's our definition of neighbor. So don't read that verse from Christ and think, well, he's not my neighbor. If God's put them in your life, they're your neighbor, and this is the behavior he hopes you'll give to them. Verse 6, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing, it rejoices in the truth. Verse 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I could have a little fun with the word endure right now. Love will help you endure your husband, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to finish with the last part of his definition of love, and that's verse 8. He just says love never fails. Religion will fail. Prophecies will fail. Tongues will cease. Knowledge will fail. What you think you know won't work. But Paul seemed to be so confident in the power of love that he just said it very succinctly in 3 little words. Love never fails. Love never fails. You can't lose by loving. Isn't it amazing? I could amplify this verse so many ways. I've talked to people over here, talked to a couple of women just recently, a few months ago, who kind of have a philosophy of they've been burned so badly in love, they'll never love again. And not together, they came separately at different times, not even worried the other was going through similar problems. To both those ladies, I just smiled when they said almost identical statements. I don't think I can ever love again. I just smiled and I said, I don't think you can help not loving again. The thing you can do is change your behavior and your habits. But let me tell you something about love. It never fails. I didn't mean it in the sense that love accomplishes things for you. I meant in the sense that love never passes away. Love never vanishes. That's almost more in context with Scripture it comes in than anything else. Knowledge will vanish away, tongue will cease, prophecies will fail. But love, brother, will never fail. Love will never come to an end. Love will never. You have it in you today to love. I don't care how much you've been burned. And some of you have been burned. Some of you have been lied to by a person you trusted. You've been cheated on. You've been mistreated, maltreated. Some of you have struggled trying to find good relationships because of bad ones. Some of you have married 2 or 3 times, and every time you remarry, you look through a filter that you don't want there, but you can't help but have it there, the filter of where you've been, the past relationship. And it's impossible to just trust somebody, embrace somebody, and love them. And yet, look at you. there's something in you still wants to. But love never fails. Doesn't matter how much you've been abused, mistreated, lied to, and cheated on, there's something in your chest that just screams, I want to love somebody. And I want to be loved back by them. I want to show love. And I want to feel love coming back. To love and be loved is central in every one of it. And it's why the Bible says it'll never stop. It'll never cease. It'll never go. You're not loved less today. There might not be some person in your life who loves you like you ought to be loved, but you're not loved less. Because it won't ever fail. It's there. The real challenge to us then is get it out of the bag we hide it in. Open the box up. Take that crushed heart and bruised heart, open it up a little bit and dare to love. Dare to love. Love your kids better than you ever loved them. Love your husband, your wife, love your girlfriend, your boyfriend, love your God first and foremost with all your heart. Love him. Doesn't matter if you don't think he answered your prayers. We don't even know how to approach him sometimes. I don't love God because he does stuff for me. I love God because I can't understand him. He's bigger, magical, wonderful. I choose to love him. And then I remind myself I love him because he first loved me. I talked to some kids recently who grew up without parents in their home because their parents were abusive and they were taken away and put in a fostering system. And I said, what's the end result? And this is a long conversation. End of the conversation. I said, what is the end result of all that? When you look backwards over your life, what would you change if you could change it? One of them said, oh, I'd change everything. The other one said, well, I don't know. Because I still feel like I've been loved. Feel like I've been treasured. My adopted parents kept telling me they had me by choice. They had me by choice. My grandmother, it's a wonderful thing, this thing called love. I can't define it any better than Paul did. I can't understand it. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it. I love what it feels like. I love slipping it on. It feels like an old, well-worn shirt from my dad when I was a little boy, and I like to pull up in his shirt after my mother pulled it out of the dryer. It's so big. I thought one day I may grow to fit this shirt. I just absorbed the warmth of it from the dryer. I still feel that way sometimes when I try to slip into the presence of God. It's so big, I'll never fit the image Christ has built for me, but I love the warmth that I get when I try to slip him on to be what he wants me to be. Stand, please. Somebody say, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Slip him on today. Father, thank you for your many, many blessings. Thank you most of all for your challenge to us to love all men, love you, love everything that you have created and made. We give you praise for all things today. And be glad today. You're embraced by God. You're loved by him. Love him back and love the man he's created. Give the Lord a hand.